Hi, it's Dawn from Dawn's Dirt. Dirt can mean gardening, dirt can mean farming, dirt can mean agriculture, dirt can mean pigs, chickens, whatever we want it to mean. Dirt can mean politics, dirt can mean religion. And today we are with Abey again because she was so lovely the first time around that we wanted to have her the second time around. Abey from Ruckle Farm. And this time we are going to chat about she's got a book coming out. And so welcome here, Abey, and tell us what's the name of your book.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks so much for having me back. It's great to talk to you here again. My book is called Radical Farm Animals, Food, and Our Future. And so it's a book that explores why well sourced animal foods are good for the environment, for our health, and animal welfare. And so it dives into those topics. And then it's also a homesteading guide. So it offers information and personal stories and tips on raising cattle, both for dairy and beef, uh, raising sheep, chickens for eggs and meat, and then we also raise turkeys. And then there's information on gardening, preserving, cheese making, and lots of real food recipes. So my intention with writing the book is to not only help people make an informed decision about the food system that they want to support, but to actually inspire more people to get involved in producing their own food or at least cooking from scratch, even if they're not wanting to take those next steps towards producing food and the commitment that that involves, but how we can all benefit so greatly from returning to a real food diet.
I love it. Right on par with all the things that I love and I do and I teach and all the things. Love it, love it, love it. So tell us a little bit, because I don't know if anyone listened to our last episode, but can you just give us a brief history of who you are and what you do and how you came about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live at Ruckle Heritage Farm, which is a 200-acre farm within a provincial park on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. And I grew up on this island, but I didn't grow up on this farm. My mom came here in 1999, which was my last year of high school, and I was originally from Manitoba. We would spend summers there, and so I've been around a lot of farming. Our family would go back in the summers. We had a farm, big gardens. We didn't raise animals, but my uncle had a dairy farm. My grandpa raised cattle, and I loved going out and checking the cows with him. And then I became a first generation vegetarian at 12, and I was a vegetarian for about a decade. By this time, in my early 20s, I was living in California, and I'd started to eat meat again and was dabbling in all sorts of different diets, trying veganism as well. And then I met a woman who really introduced me to the importance of food production and processing, and that it's not just about what we eat, but how that was produced and how that was raised. And so that was very interesting to me, but still kind of pulled into all these directions. In LA, there's lots of vegan restaurants, vegan food, uh, and then that same woman, I was at this point, I had a Pilates studio in Beverly Hills, and I was teaching her Pilates, and she said to me, "Whatever you do, don't have a vegan pregnancy." And it was such an impactful sentence that I'm so grateful for. I had healthy pregnancies, healthy children, and it really led me down a path of really focusing on nutrient density and truly experiencing how beneficial animal foods are. And then around this same time, still struggling with that question of if it's right or wrong to eat animals, I heard Diana Rogers talk about how there is no deathless diet. And for me, something really clicked there in that understanding that creatures are going to die no matter what we eat. And so, if that's true and you hold that for a moment, then I want to take accountability for my food choices and recognize the importance of taking care of my own health. And so, at this time in California, we moved to Northern California from LA. We had a garden. We had as many as 6 chickens, really interested in that urban homesteading. And then the opportunity to come back to Salt Spring came up and join my mom and my stepdad on this farm. And so we moved here in January of 2021, started farming, all the things, so much to learn. And I really fell in love with agriculture. I really love being around animals. I mean, animal agriculture is my true passion. I I eat an omnivorous diet. I love plants as well, but I really connect with I just know how much animal-based foods have had such a beneficial impact in my life, and I feel truly saved me from years of disordered eating and really getting back to that real food diet. Again, that includes plants, but so much protein and fat from those animal sources. It just freed me from that obsession about eating. It just helped repair my relationship with food, which was also, I mean, I started meditating at that time, and our health is so multifaceted. I don't want to oversimplify it, but certainly nutrition and what we're eating is so impactful. And so, yeah, it's just really passionate about how we can continue to educate people on those pieces of it. I mean, certainly, when you understand how beneficial animal foods can be for the environment, how necessary animals are for our environment, and the health impact, then really it's an ethical choice. But I've also been so fascinated by really exploring the ethics of eating meat and really come to peace with that decision. And so it's this book is my musings on that and really exploring that in detail.
Yeah, I love it. The fact that you were vegan and now you're a farmer, an animal farmer, like that's almost like a dichotomy. And I went to farmers markets because I had my own chickens and eggs this summer, and I was going to farmers markets, and there was one woman, and she came to my booth and she grilled me on what I did with my chickens and how I treated them and what I fed them and all of la. Ask me all the questions. And those are my favorite people because they actually care. They actually want to know where their food comes from. They actually care about farming. They just care. They're my favorite. And so she decided that she would go from vegan or vegetarian. No, vegan. She was vegan to eating my eggs. And then later in the summer, I found out that this young woman is pregnant. And so what it was her and her partner just decided that, when you said about a vegan pregnancy, she had decided that that's probably not going to, or they as a couple decided that a vegan pregnancy is probably not going to be the healthiest for her or the baby. And so they decided to eat my eggs. And man, it's almost going to make me cry because here I am as a farmer, um, pouring into the life of these young people and just helping them with that journey in life. So I think that your book is going to make an impact on people. And so is that the why? Why did you write your book?
Yeah, well, that's such a powerful story, and that's wonderful to hear. I love that. um, I originally started writing the book as a way of documenting what I was learning. So I felt that what my parents were teaching us to them was common knowledge, and it's just not anymore. And so much of that wisdom of farming, whether it's how to raise animals, grow a garden, but all of the preservation methods as well, and those traditional foods, so much of that is being lost. And so it was a way of documenting and preserving this knowledge that I was being so fortunate to learn. And then because that it was interesting, like coming to the point of I understood so much of again what Diana says of like there is no deathless diet, but then being on a farm and having such a close connection with animals, it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of, but it was really emotionally complex. And I think that's what, for me, it was coming. again to terms with that reality of killing these animals that I had cared for. And we had and at that same time, as far as well as doing my own writing on it, it was to process that. It was sharing some of that on social media. And holy smokes, the vitriol that got thrown at me was staggering. Like, I mean, it's shocking what people say to each other online. Um, but I chose, I mean, I could have done without the name calling for sure. And it's really wild, like how angry people can be. But like how you're saying those consumers that you love, though, like, I really admire the passion of people who are vegan. I think their heart is in the right place, but it's really seeing a problem and then we have very a lot in common, but then seeing a completely different solution. And so I just chose to try to meet it with the curiosity of what do these people have to say? Because some of it I used to think myself, and having an empathy for where they're coming from, and then using that as motivation to learn more. And so when they're talking about the animals take up too much land, it's too much water, it's too much feed, the health impacts, the greenhouse gas, like all the things that, you know, on and on are these like whack-a-mole of why people think we should either eliminate meat or reduce our meat consumption. And so by exploring these things, I just found myself learning so much more and then wanting to continue to share that. And so that's really so much of what the book has become. It's really that part one is exploring, and I know it will continue to grow, like, as far as there's, like, that other layer and that other layer, but this is really um, an expression of what I have learned about those 3 pieces, that environmental piece, the health piece, the ethical piece of eating animals, and sharing my story, because I think that it's important that we hear what farmers have to say and really understand, again, that emotionally complex part of it. And that what has kind of carried me through is that idea of just because it's sad doesn't mean it's wrong. Because I can feel all of those big feelings and I continue to. I mean, there is part of me that's more used to it, but I'll still have a good cry when a favorite, you know, steer goes to butcher, but not internalizing that as a that I shouldn't eat meat. Like that one doesn't equate the other. And and then yes, part two is the homesteading guide, and it shares my experience with milking and it really dives into the history, both past and current, of raw milk and why it's so beneficial, which I know we talked about before. I know you're a big believer as well. And then just sharing the real food recipes, because I know it's challenging. We live in a world that is so full and people are wanting that convenience, and we've been misled away from the very foods we evolved to eat, and trying to welcome people back to how delicious and truly healthy cooking from scratch can be, and whether that's, small or really going all into it. I think that's just so beneficial for um for us all.
Hey friends, on Dawn's Dirt, we get real about growing food, farming, homesteading, living free, and digging into the stuff that actually matters. If you're loving the dirt we're dishing out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on your favorite social media platforms. That's how we keep growing this community of badass, soil covered, chicken loving, freedom chasing humans. Like and subscribe to me on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Come be part of the movement. For sure, absolutely. So I love the part of your book where what you're doing is you're trying to build bridges. And I've thought about a lot about this lately, that people live in fear. Like right now we see it in society. It's crazy right now. But what it is, I feel like, is people are are afraid. They're afraid of raw dairy. They're afraid of water bath canning. They're afraid of killing an animal. They are afraid of, and they're just, everyone's just trying to do the best they can in the soup that we're given. And it comes down to fear and wanting to do the right thing. The heart and the intentions are always right, even with a vegan or even with someone who drinks raw dairy and, all these different things. And so I love the fact that you are building the bridges, not through name calling, because that's never okay, but building bridges, asking questions, having conversations, having difficult conversations with people. Like, that's really how we're going to change the world. And that's really how we're going to, learn and be able to live with one another in society, is when you just see them as a human being and you just go, okay, how can I help you with this? So back to the mom, how can I help you? I know you don't like, I know you're a vegan and I understand why, but how can I help you, maybe make some changes for yourself and for your baby? And so it's when you build the bridges and you let her question and you let her, she can you pull up pictures on your phone? Yep, I sure can. And so I showed her pictures of my chickens, and that's what she needed to make that step, right? And so it's the connection, and so when it comes to food, it's connecting back to that food. When you have your favorite steer that you bring off to market, you have connection to that steer. And I know among like some mainstream farmers that I know, they always say that sometimes that one tastes a little bit better than the others, depending on how they behaved in the herd or whatever. So there's a little bit of a joke around that. But yeah, it's about connection and questions and learning. And yeah, you're right. I'm a proponent of raw dairy. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that it becomes really inviting people to get to know their farmer because, again, like asking all those questions are so important because the labels are a great starting place, but they're so misleading at the same time. I mean, you can slap a label on something and people aren't necessarily, I mean, we know this, aren't getting what they think they are. And so, and I also think like, for so long when we continue to rely on so few people to feed so many people. And they're kind of like this faceless farmer to so many people, whereas we used to be living much more in community where those were our neighbors and our selves. And, it's going to look a little bit different depending on where you live. Like, I mean, living in a city doesn't mean that you're so far away from a farm. I mean, a lot of times I think people branching out a little and finding those farms nearby, also because it's so healthy to be around animals and be in nature and like have that experience that isn't just a petting zoo. And it's not like every farm has the time to like, take you around. We've got work to do. But there's, I think, such a value in actually taking the steps towards connecting with your food. But even if it is also like connecting with your grocery store to what they are carrying, or just really starting to understand the the labels and just all of the additives in our food, and that the more we can get back to the whole food, is really important. And you know, people are so entrenched, I think, in a lot of their views, and I think a lot of this also comes from this identity piece where I have found that if people want to eat a vegan diet, like it's their decision to make. Like, I'm all for that freedom to choose. I mean, of course, we have to make our own choices, and people come to this for so many reasons. And I recognize there will be those people, at least in the short term, that just aren't comfortable. Like, no matter how much they understand, they just don't want to eat animals. I mean, I think that's few in a way, in the sense that I think a lot of people are making that choice because they think it's the right choice. Um, but but I think that when we start to build our identity around something, it is very hard to change your mind. I mean, it takes a really um, a lot of strength to be like, oh wow, like I was wrong. And so, I mean, I was a vegetarian for about a decade. I wasn't a vegan for very long. Like, I don't even really know. I mean, it's kind of was like maybe a month here and a few months there. And um, but there was certainly just this span of trying to figure out what to eat. And we it's kind of wild that we are the only species that struggles with what do I eat? Like we have so many options. Um, but yeah, I think just trying to educate giving them that information, because sometimes people will say to me like, "Oh, don't engage, like they'll never change their mind." And it's like, I don't we don't live in a, of course people change their minds. I changed my mind. Like something shifted in me and sent me down a very different path. And sometimes like I will comment, not to like, it's not that I want to be disrespectful of other people's choices, but it's trying to like when you're in that echo chamber of everyone just being like, "Yeah, right, like we shouldn't eat animals," and then like a little farmer pops up and says like, "Hey everybody, like how about you can make more impact by supporting good farming than you can rejecting all animal agriculture." Like I hope maybe that makes those people think, or maybe it at least makes people who kind of come to that conversation with understandably confused. Like this is the thing, is like I get it. Like there's even with, it's just so easy to be overwhelmed by like all these different pieces of information. And like, for decades we were led to believe that fat is bad for us, fat makes you fat, fat gives you heart disease, like all of this nonsense that if you come back and if you like dig into that. And like I love Nina Teichol's book, The Big Fat Surprise, because it's a thick one that really goes into that. But just the weak, like the poor science, weak associations, and just like bulldozing through of this view, even though there were people even back then saying, "What about sugar? What about carbohydrates?" I just continue to be astounded by the amount of people who still think that animal foods are bad for us. And I can empathize with why, as I said, like all of this information. But to think that the food that we have been eating our entire existence, like whether you want to argue to the volume we've been eating it, sure, like we can discuss that, but we have been eating that since even before we, like our hominin ancestors. And so to think that hundreds of thousands of years later, that's the problem. I mean, it's ludicrous, but it's like, yeah, it's like religious and corporate influence really got in there, and here we are today. And it's been, I mean, I have a chapter in the book called The Worst Advice We Were Ever Given. And I don't think it's just being hyperbolic. Like that dramatically impacted human health, not just in North America, but around the world. And yeah, so I'm passionate with sharing with that with people, because again, if you start understanding that, I think you'll change your mind. And, if you don't, that's okay. But at least you deserve to hear this. You deserve to
For
make your own informed decision. So, thanks.
For sure. No, I hear you. And for me, I've been saying it for many, many years now. He who controls the food controls the people. And when you look at a grocery store shelf, I saw one of those, like, you know how you're looking at your phone and your phone feeds you what you want to look at. So if you're vegan, it's going to feed you that. Or if you're a carnivore, it's going to feed you that. Or if you're whatever, it's going to feed you that. So our phones are feeding us only the information that we think we want to bring in. But when you take a step back and when you go to a farmer's market, you shake the hands of the people that are growing and raising and producing and butchering your food, and that's so important. So this one video that popped up on my feed was of a man, and he looked at lot numbers, or I forget what it was, some specific numbers on egg cartons down in the States, and it was like most of the egg cartons or eggs, even with all the different labels on them, were from the same massive farm. And I can attest to this with the price of a dozen cucumbers. So I've farmed. I've been a vegetable farmer my entire life. And when my parents were farming, a dozen long English cucumbers was $7 a dozen to the warehouse. And I was speaking to a farmer out of that a cucumber farmer out in Ontario, and they were saying it's $6 a dozen now. And that's 30 years later, 25, 30 years later. And so the price of food hasn't changed. So the way we have farmed has changed. And I don't fault the big farmers for doing what they have to do to stay in farming and to stay in agriculture. This is kind of the trend and the shift that we've made as a society as a whole to go into this big food system. But most of the food that you get in the grocery store shelves no longer is even food. Like it's garbage. And so I love that your book and that you and me and, as a society, hopefully we're going to switch this pendulum back to the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, where your farmer, where you shake the hands with the person that feeds you, where you can know and ask the person, hey, can I see the video of the chickens again? I just want to know that those chickens are being raised properly. And it's the connection with our food. And that's where we need to get back to. And I fully believe that actually will save society and solve global hunger problems, if I can go so far as to say that. And so you've wrote a book about it, and I teach people how to do farm to table sales and raise food. And so with all of these things, and this is why I'm even doing the podcast, is how can we bridge these gaps and how can we change the world? So thanks for changing the world. Yeah. Yeah. Now I
Yeah.
rattled on.
No, it's great. I mean, I think that it is so important, and I think it's just everyone. I mean, through researching the book and my own, evolution of understanding, I've really come to understand that we need more people to get involved, which I know is certainly part of your passion and your goal, and I think it's like, and it's not that. I mean, certainly we need more farmers. I mean, that's a crisis for sure. But it's also like really helping people understand how much potential they have, either like we've been talking about to support farmers, but also to produce their food on any small scale. Um, and when we lived in California, my first garden, I want to say it was like maybe like 6 by 10 feet. It was in our parking lot. It was like in this back corner. And there was this beautiful lemon tree, and we produced, I mean, it was a lot of food, and it was also so rewarding. I mean, it was really like the gateway to farming for me for sure. Um, and so beneficial, like as I was becoming more disillusioned with this urban, very concrete life that I was living, to see my then, I'm about 1 year old son, like just like grazing the tomato plants and like how powerful that was. And when I was researching the book, I learned that in 1943, the Victory Gardens produced 40% of US fresh produce, fresh vegetables. And so, and Canada was really similar numbers too. And so there, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of food. And I think that we've how many people have lawns? It's just a lawn. Like, could you be producing some level of food there? Like, if you have your patio, and you're doing your herbs in your little potted, whatever, or you're growing like mushroom kits in your house, or all these different ways. Like, it might seem sort of trivial, but it's not. Like, the more we all take some ownership, I think the more we become connected. And I think there are people that do it and are like, nah, it's not for me. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, like, wow, this is really rewarding and this is really worthwhile. Um, and so, yeah, I hope that people, that is shifting. And I think through the COVID supply chains and things that happened did wake people up, at least for a little while, enough to, I think, have some surge of like interest for sure in that sort of homesteading idea. And then But yeah, I hope that people can continue to 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 reprioritize again how we're spending our food dollars, because I think that's one of the big arguments is like, oh, like, regeneratively or organically produced food is so expensive. And I mean, I empathize with people who are struggling to put food on the table, but it certainly really depends on what you're comparing it to, and also an understanding of all of the hidden costs, both to our own health, animal welfare, and the environment that our food choices are making. And so it's not about being perfect, and it's about, like, I think just inviting people to, like, look at what are you eating and what could you produce yourself, or what could you buy locally, seasonally? How can you um, make these small changes and then kind of cut out the crap? Because I do think that if we, you're talking about that grocery store shelf with like all this like food like products, and they're not cheap. I feel like it's like, the chips and the all those things that we buy because they taste good or they're convenient, or they're addictive. Um, if you really, Alan Williams talks really well about this, that like if you take that price per ounce, ground beef, I mean, it's cheaper. Organ meat, certainly cheaper. And then it doesn't even touch the nutritional comparison. So,
For sure. Well, and I've always thought too, if people can grow gardens or grow vegetables or grow what they can in the space they have, which I do teach a gardening course in the spring, and I'm doing a microgreens class this fall. If people can do what they can do, then if they plant a row of carrots and they don't have to buy a lot of carrots, or they can eat carrots all summer long, they can take the money that they would spend on carrots and they could turn that into money they would spend with a local farmer on beef that, yes, it might be a little bit higher price, but you just save dollars doing, making different choices. And so that's really what it comes down to is what is your choice? Um, People will do as I have my nails done, people will make choices on their nails and their lashes and their clothing and their sunglasses and they'll make and their $6 Starbucks coffee. They'll make those choices all day long. And yet they'll come to the farmer's market table and go, ooh, that's expensive. It's just, awareness around how to make different choices and how to make choices for your body. And you're right. Chips are expensive and they're just filler. They're not necessarily nutrient dense. I was talking to a teacher just at a farmer's market here a bit ago too, and she was saying that with her children that she has in her class, she teaches preschool. She can tell just by behavior which kids are getting fed properly with good food and which kids are just bringing, and she can see it in their snacks that they bring to school. What they're eating affects their behavior so much. And so we've got a whole generation eating off the middle shelves of the grocery store. And yeah, I think it's affecting us as a society as a whole in a negative fashion. It's taken us
yeah.
from, here where we used to be to here. We can't work the same way. We can't do the same things. And if there ever was a food crisis, man, people are going to starve. I see that as a freight train coming, and I sometimes feel like I'm little boy that cried wolf. Like over and over and over, our food system is in trouble. He who controls the food controls the people. Like I keep saying it over and over and over, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel like why aren't people getting it? I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to go dark on our food system if you let yourself. And because it is, and it's challenging because, people, I mean, people want to talk about like, oh, you can't feed the world regeneratively. And that simply isn't true for a number of reasons, which we could talk about. But it's also like, again, what are we doing here? Like, let's, instead of talking about what 8 billion people should do, like, what can we do ourselves? But it can feel sometimes like, that like an insurmountable problem. Like, how do we get this genie back in the bottle because of all of the numerous ways we have, centralized our food system and just what we've created. And like when we're talking about the like, oh, is it expensive piece? It's like we've built this idea of what certain things cost. It's like you go to the coffee shop and you're like, well, I guess that's what it costs. But food, we've come to think should be cheap. And I think that rather than asking ourselves, why is food so expensive? We should be asking ourselves, how is food so cheap? Because if you've ever produced food sustainably, you understand like it's not easy to make, to make a living, and I think this is why we're losing so many farmers today. And when you start looking at like, land numbers, and it becomes very frightening very fast. But it's finding hope and just kind of not. It's easy. It's very. I mean, it is radical to want to know how your food is produced. It is perhaps arguably more radical to be optimistic for our future. But I think there is so much hope in regenerative agriculture and sustainable practices, local food systems, because that is what is going to help our soil and against drought. And so there is so much hope there. I think we just need to keep moving forward, and I think that's why educating consumers is so important, because there's so much power in that consumer demand. And to go back to people who are choosing to eat a vegan diet, it's like I just think if those people, like, those are conscientious food dollars being kind of removed from the marketplace, from the meat marketplace. And what we need is conscientious consumers within that saying, like, demanding those better things. I've heard Will Harris talk about, like when he started producing grass-fed beef. I mean, if you go back far enough, that was just beef. But if when he was kind of like the original selling that when people weren't. And now, of course, most people understand like what grass-fed pastured beef is. And so um and then yeah, I mean what you're saying about the children's health piece, like I that breaks my heart. I mean, when like what has become, the kid foods, the snack foods, even like, that we have the kids menu. Like, how ludicrous is the kids menu? Like, why are kids eating mac and cheese, pizza, french fries? Like, and then it's like, oh, the adults will have like, well, so I think first of all, we should do away with that kids menu. Order a smaller portion, share something, do that instead. And um but yeah, like the more finding ways to feed kids nutrient dense food. And I think understanding too, like, if kids are presented with healthy food, they're not going to starve themselves. And now those picky eaters, and I get there's certain like, sensory issues and different things people are battling against. It's not simple, but I think that a lot of it is what, we don't want to have the battle. And so we serve, where we think that they aren't going to eat it. But I have found with my own kids, I mean, their first foods were egg yolk and liver, and we followed the Weston Price Foundation food, nutritional guidelines, and um, and I'm so grateful for that. I think it sets you up for a lifetime of real food. But I do think it's just, yeah, what changes can we make? And it just becomes, this is what's for dinner. Like, this is healthy food and you'll eat it. If
For sure. For
if
sure.
there's no buttered noodles on the side.
Are you sitting on a farm or homestead that could be making you real money? Tired of guessing on how to market your products? I owned a 36,000 square foot greenhouse. I ran 2 farm to table stores. I had 30 people on payroll. I brought in $2.5 million in gross revenue in 2020, selling farm goods directly to customers. Now I teach farmers and homesteaders how to make money and save money off the land they already have. Whether you're selling eggs, beef, produce, baked goods, or anything in between, if you want to get into direct marketing and grow your sales, I'm the girl for you. Stop leaving money on the table and start putting it into your bank account. Join me at Dawn's Dirt Business Coaching and let's make your farm pay you back. No, I was raised like that. And, that comes back to a little bit of old school values too. When I was growing up, my mom made a lot of home cooked meals. And I remember we used to go for groceries on Friday nights, and the treat was McDonald's on Friday nights. And she used it as a threat. Because if we were misbehaving when we did the groceries, I'm going to go home and peel potatoes. I'm going to go home and peel potatoes, because that's what we ate most of the time was meat, potatoes, and vegetables. Sometimes we had a little pasta and stuff in there, but like that's what we ate, home cooked meals. That's how I was raised. And my mom made a meal, and if you didn't eat it, like, tough luck. I guess you don't eat till tomorrow morning because, that's just the way it was. My mom didn't go as far as my grandmother did. My grandmother used to cook fish and my dad hated fish, which, different kids have different tastes. I know my brother didn't like corn and, I didn't like certain things, but peas. I don't super love cooked peas. But my grandmother would cook fish for my dad, and she would serve it to him all the way until the next day if he didn't eat that freaking fish. So I think that's a little extreme, but
Little extreme.
you're right. If you put good food in front of the kids, they're going to eat it. They're not going to let themselves starve, or for too long anyway. They'll eventually eat something. Yeah, it's just the value and the way we've changed and shifted as society to almost, you're right, cater with the kids menu. Oh, you don't like a steak? Okay, well, here's some. Yeah, craft dinner. I don't know. I think
I
we
love
need to
that.
get back to some of
That's
those
so Canadian.
old
I love
school
it. The
values.
craft dinner. I went
Yeah,
to the
yeah, yeah,
States and I was
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
nobody knew what craft dinner was. It's just macaroni and cheese. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
So, and then one other thing I was thinking too while you were speaking there was, I was selling eggs at the farmer's market and I was selling them for $10 a dozen. And people would say $10 a dozen. And I'd say, yep, because if I'm not selling them at $10 a dozen, to be honest with you, I wouldn't stand here at the farmer's market for this. I would have a few chickens for myself and I wouldn't share. And that's what I would say to people. It's very blunt and honest, but the truth is I need to make something for my family to be able to afford, my glasses and the lights in my house and, a few things like that. So if I don't charge $10 a dozen, then there's no point in me doing this. And you can go to the grocery store and get those eggs, and that's fine. Make your choice. But why bother? Why bother? Why would I even bother? And so that's where we need to understand too that if we want small farms, if we want small farmers and you want to know where your food comes from and you want the carrot that's, grown in within your region or the honey that was raised in your region or whatever it is, you're going to have to make some choices. And it's just the way it is. Like, or go to the grocery store. That's your choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. So tell us more about your book. You've written it over time. Is it almost like a diary? And I'm curious, you said the chapter of what was the chapter you talked about? Because I'm curious about what that is.
Well, the chapter that I mentioned, the worst advice we were ever given. So the word that
Yeah.
chapter, so that yes, maybe I should have elaborated earlier. So that went into the low fat guidelines primarily, but really into just how we arrived at this place of saying that like meat and eggs and dairy are bad for our health. Um, so I mean, the book is, in the introduction, I say that it's part memoir, part homesteading guide, part love letter to farming, and it does tell there's certain things about my history or my experience with food, my relationship with food, and a little bit of there's like a little bit of history about this farm, and then there's also there's also stories about even like in I think that in writing the animal chapters, like I did share, like here's what I know, but, like, let's be honest, like, an entire book could be written like, entire library of books can be written on raising sheep, for example. So, I'm not intending for this to be like, "Okay, like, I'm ready to go," and necessarily, it's like that's it's a great starting place, and I think it's gonna really help people, and I think farmers and aspiring homesteaders alike. Like, I think we can all learn from each other, and there's, It's a lot of the it's my experience, but it's also the wisdom of my stepdad who's been farming for a long time. I mean, there's a story that my uncle tells about like how much land his dad used to, farm to raise a family compared to nowadays and things like that. Um, but within those chapters too, it's like, in the chicken chapter, I talk about the chicken of tomorrow contest and, that we didn't really used to eat a lot of chicken and like how that has evolved. And so yeah, so there's a lot of like different pieces. I think it's weaving in those stories as well as a lot of facts about agriculture and just inviting people to see a bigger picture that I think is so important in deciding what you want to eat and motivating people to be part of the solution. So
I love that. If you're listening and read the book, pick up Abby's book, read the book, and then I'll just throw in there when you don't know what to do, hire Dawn the homestead coach, and I can coach you through step by step on what to do, because there's a big difference between reading it, which is lovely and beautiful and grateful, and then man, shit, what's happening at 2 o'clock in the morning? Maybe I'm not available at 2 o'clock in the morning, but like the step by steps on how to, and having someone work with you. So beautifully they go hand in hand, and I love that. I love that. So any final parting thoughts? So we've been touching on meat and eating ethically, and all, and food and types of food. Any advice? What advice would you give to someone who is trying to explore changing their mind with their food, or even explore homesteading or doing things on their own? What advice would you give someone?
think anyone that's wanting to actively, I think reading and listening to podcasts like this is giving you a jumping off place, but it's connecting with people in your community or to get that mentorship. I think that's so important. I mean, we were fortunate in coming here that we had that support, and I kind of can't imagine it any other way because there is so much that comes up, and I think it's wonderful to, like, wanna do all the things, but starting and then kind of rippling out from there because there's so much to know, and I think we can really, easily burn ourselves out with I know personally, like, I love self-sufficiency and I wanna do all the things, but it's coming to more of an understanding of how I can't do it all, and I think that's a wonderful thing to explore as well, is how can we live in community more? Like, we're kind of all in our own bubbles and we go shopping or we do this, or we produce our food, but I mean, we do produce food for the community, as you were talking about at your farmers markets, but it's also, you know, I mean, if your only focus is homesteading, like that might be a different equation. I know people have those real self-sufficiency goals and making that like major lifestyle change, but I think even in that situation, it's like you don't want to go it alone. Like we should be able to call on people who have had that breech calf before. Like, what are you gonna do? And there's so many great resources, and so my website is radicalfarmbook.com, and I'm doing a Substack on there that I just got started last week, and I'm going to be putting a lot of resources on there as well. So certainly people can go to the website and find information on buying the book, but they could also I really want to provide those resources because it's like finding trusted resources, right? Like there's a lot of people out there giving their opinion, but there's so many people doing really, really amazing things and sharing their knowledge. And so that's really important to just keep learning and keep being optimistic, keep seeing, the good in the world. There is so much good in the world. And yet we, certainly it's like we're told to think otherwise, and it's, we can find so much hope for the future of food.
Sure. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. We, the people, have the power to change it all. So, absolutely. Thanks so much for being on the show today. Thanks so much for taking your time. Thanks for being a farmer, honestly. Thanks for feeding people and teaching people and raising food. And we need more Abbeys, and we need more Dons, and we need more small scale farmers in the world. So that's why I'm here, and that's what I'm about. So thanks so much
Yeah.
for your time, and really appreciate this.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the
Okay.
opportunity, and thank you for all you do.